Hello and welcome to the next video for the making of BattleBrain. So today what I'm going to cover is making the brain talk. A couple people have asked me how did I do that, so this is going to be kind of like a code walkthrough on how I did that, and I'm going to go and add some more phrases or sayings and just show what classes that I use in order to do that. So just to give a history of what's going on here. This is the model, the brain model that's in the game, and in Studio Max, when I created this model, I separated out different parts. So I have the mouth here, which is just a plane with the texture on it for the mouth. And when he talks, all I do is I just swap out images onto this plane, and it gives like a South Park type of effect. So in order to do that, though, I had to separate the brain into different objects. So his glasses, his eyes, his body, and his bones. So, but we're just going to be concerned with the mouth because we had to make it a separate object. So I wanted to show you that because if I go to Unity, where I imported the model, and I look at the hierarchy of the brain object, you'll see that it matches Studio Max exactly. And there's a mouth object here, and there's a couple of scripts that's on this that handles the talking, and so that's what we're going to be doing right now. So right now there's a script on here called DV Lip Sync Manager, and that's short for Divide Arts Lip Sync Manager, because I made a couple of classes that help me lip sync the images to match the audio file. So that's what happens if I was to play this. You'll see that the brain comes up and he speaks, and that's because of this script here. We're going to walk through and see how that was done.
Let's play BattleBrain.
Okay, so I'm going to pause it there. So what the script did is it went through and it created, the manager went in here and it created another script, and this script is handling each frame of animation, the duration that each frame played, and that's pretty much how we're going to get the brain to talk. It'll make more sense as I step through it. So let's get started. What I want to do is, in the game, I'll let it play now, but in the game, when you're playing against the brain in BattleBrain mode, he's going to do a little trash talking to you. So if he gets a match, he's going to say something smart. And so what I want to do is I want to add that in. So let's go to the BattleBrain mode.
Let's play BattleBrain.
I'm going to go to play BattleBrain. So pretty much he's here now, and he's quiet. He doesn't say anything. And what I want to happen is that if I pick something, then once it's the brain's turn, when he returns back to his spot here at the top right corner, I call it when he returns home, then he's going to say something smart. And right now he doesn't say anything, but we're going to fix that. Okay, the first thing we need to do is, in the hierarchy here, I have the main brain. This is a prefab of the brain model for the title screen. And then I have a list of different other screens, and here's the play screen. I have a different prefab here, and another instance of the brain. If I open that one up and go to his mouth object, there's no scripts on this one, so there's no talking. So we're just going to start from the beginning, so you'll see kind of how I did the talking and the animation. So the first thing I'm going to do is add on my main script. So I'm going to type DV for Divide Arts, and it's DV Lip Sync Manager. Okay, and let's walk through each one of these fields. Now this is a script that I created, and I exposed some of these variables. So pretty much the way that the brain animates is that I have already loaded in a couple of images for the brain. So this is his mouth, and all of the different animations that his mouth can do. And if you look at the name, you'll see that it's named Brain Mouth 0. So every image has an index, and so that index is Brain Mouth 1 all the way up to Brain Mouth 9. So there's 10 images total that we're going to be working with, and what this script does is it asks for, that's the first thing it asks for. It asks for the number of textures that will be used for the mouth animations. So we're going to tell it that there's going to be 10 textures total that we're going to be dealing with, and then it needs the path to where the textures are. And so the path here under my resources folder, I don't have to include resources because in Unity anything under the resources folder just can be loaded without actually putting resources in the path. So it's just under images, and that's where I have all the images listed here. So for the texture path, it's just going to be images slash and the name of the texture, which is brain mouth, because all of these textures begin with brain mouth and then the index. So that's why it's images brain mouth, but we're not going to put the index because the script will add that on. So that's the texture path where it's going to find the textures. The next parameter is the default texture index. And what that is the default texture index is when, let's say the brain is going to say a phrase, I call them phrases, or if he's going to say something, when he finished talking, I need to pick one of these mouth animation that's going to be his default. So what I've chosen here is once he's finished talking, I would like for him to close his mouth and have this little smile here. And that is brain mouth 7. So 7 is the index of that, and so that's where I'm going to tell it that I want this to be. So the default texture index will default back to texture 7. Okay, so the next thing that the lip sync manager does is that I had to come up with a couple of scripts that's going to allow me to put as many as many I guess phrases that the brain could handle, unlimited amount. So what I can do is that I can tell it how many phrases that this brain will be able to say. So right now the size is 0. And let's say for this demo, I'm going to just do 2. What I did, I'll show you here. If I go into sounds and lip sync, these are all of the new sayings that I want him to say. I'm not going to step through all of them. I'm just going to add 2. But for instance, this is his beginning saying.
You got me.
Oh, wait a minute, not that one. This one.
Let's play BattleBrain.
And so I went through and I made a couple of new ones. So this is a laugh. And this is, what is this one?
Piece of cake.
Okay, he says piece of cake. So these are the first 2 sayings that he's going to say. So if he gets a match, he's going to either laugh at you or say piece of cake. So those are the 2 audio files that I have, and we're going to write some code to load those in. So if we go back to the mouth for the brain, I'm going to tell it that I want to have 2 phrases. And what that does, I'm going to walk through the script later and show, do a quick walkthrough of what goes on behind the scenes of the script. But for right now, the only thing that this script needs to know is for the first phrase, it needs to know an audio clip that, that's actually going to play when he talks. And then it's going to ask for a JSON text file, and the text file will be a list of just data. Pretty much it's going to tell the script how many frames of animation that it's going to have, and what is the duration or the delay between showing each frame, so that each frame of animation will sync up with what is going on in the audio clip. So let's go ahead and populate this. So I know for the audio clip that I want to have this first laugh here. which is called brain match 0, when the brain gets a match. So brain match index 0 and brain match index 1. So let's add those on. Just drag the first audio clip down here, brain match 0, and I'll drag the second one here. So I've told it that I want to say 2 phrases, but these phrases have no JSON file associated with it. So I've already created a JSON file for the first intro, and so I'm just going to duplicate that so I don't have to start from the beginning. So let's go here. We'll just make a copy or clone this JSON file here. So we're going to copy that and paste the clone. I'm going to rename these. Now, just for my benefit, it's easier if I rename the JSON file. It's going to match the name of the audio file, just so I'll know which goes with which. So the audio file was named brain match 0, so I'm going to call this the same thing, brain match 0. So that's brain match 0.json. Okay, and we're going to paste another copy. We're going to call this one brain match 1. Alright, so we have our 2 files. And go ahead and close that out and come back to Unity and refresh, and you see that the files popped up here. Now they're just clones of the other files, so they have data that are associated with saying let's play BattleBrain, but we're going to go and change that. For right now, I just had to create the file so that I can go to the script here on the mouth and populate the JSON file. So for brain match 0, we're going to tell it use this text file, brain match 0, to control the animation, and for brain match 1, use the brain match 1. There we go. So that's all this script needs. And so what we need to do is go and get each one of these and update the animation. So let's open up one of these JSON files and edit it to match. So I'm going to open up brain match 0, and I'm going to edit it to match what I want to happen when brain match 0, the actual sound plays. So to do that, we'll go here, just double click that. It's going to open up Visual Studio so that I can go and show how this is done. So like I said before, keep in mind while this is loading that what I'm going to be telling in this script is I'm going to be in my images folder. I'm going to the script's loaded in all 10 of these images starting at 0 to 9, and I'm going to be telling using the JSON file, telling the script which images to show and for how long to show them so that it matches up or lip syncs to the audio. So let's go here. It should be loaded now. Okay. So for this first audio clip, I'm just going to listen to that. So the first audio clip, come here under sounds, lip sync. Let's play that one. Okay, so that's just a laugh. So there's really not a lot to sync there. I probably can get away with just having 1 frame of animation, which would be his smile frame. So if I look under the images and this smile or this grin, that can be the only frame that I need to show. So that we just have to remember that that is brain mouth 0, so it's index 0. So let's go back here. Now I'll walk through pretty much a quick tutorial what the JSON file does. And with the JSON file, it's just, like I said, it's a list of a way of organizing data. And so what I have here in this list is I have a list of lip sync frames, so each frame of animation. And so since this is a list, each section here inside of brackets represent 1 frame. So for each frame of animation, you have to tell it the duration. How long do I hold this frame, and this is in seconds, so I would say, okay, I'll show this frame for 0.2 or a fifth of a second. And then which frame to show is the texture index. So it's saying show texture index 0. So since this is brain match 0, and I only want to have one frame of animation, so this is a good starting. This is a good start here because we don't have to do a lot. All right, so I'm going to delete all those other frames and just leave one frame in this array. And so the texture index is 0. That's what I want. I want the grin is 0. So the texture is right. The duration is only a fifth of a second. So I don't think that that's the right duration to hold it. And just to test it out, I'm going to save this, go back to Unity. And I already added in the code a way of testing this. So if I just look through one of the main script or the lip sync manager script, pretty much on update, there's a way that I can play or the frame or play the phrase. So what I've done is I just said if I hit the P key on the keyboard, play phrase index 0, or if I hit O on the keyboard, play phrase index 1. So P will play 0 and this will play 1. And what this index is linked to is, if you go to the mouth, you'll see that when we added the two elements or the two phrases, that's what that index is. So this is element 0 and element 1. So in code, if I want to play this first one, that's what I would say is that this is element 0. So I've already added that in, and I put a little if defined, only in the Unity editor will this work. So we have a way of testing it now. So let's go ahead and test it. So I'm going to hit play. Now I put this script on the brain object that's under the play screen. So the brain object here under the main hierarchy, that's the one that loads up at the beginning. So we have to let him talk.
Let's play BattleBrain.
Okay, and now we can go to the play screen here. Okay, so now we're on the play screen. So this is the brain that we put the code on. So I'm going to hit the P key and see what happens. Okay, so that's pretty much, I think, what should happen. So the animation does change, but it's really fast. So the animation ends before anything can be said. So that's why I said we probably need to go here and tweak the times. So let's go back to the code, to the JSON file. So we need to tell it how long to hold the grin, because a fifth of a second is too fast. And the way I normally do that is I use it's really convenient to use a text editor. I mean, not text editor, but a audio editor to see the duration. I guess for this one, though, I could just use Unity itself. In Unity, if I go and select Brain Match 1, the laugh, you could come down here and it will actually show you the duration of this this audio. So, and it shows here in seconds that this is 1.458 seconds. So close to 1.5 seconds. I'm going to round it up to 1.5 seconds. So that's how long I want him to hold this grin for, is for 1.5 seconds. So I'll come here and just change this. I want the duration to be 1.5 seconds. So this time when I run it, it should line up. We'll just play it again. This time when I run it, it should sync up with the grin. Just play one frame of animation.
Let's play BattleBrain.
Let's go back to BattleBrain. So now when I hit P, perfect. Once the grin is over, then it goes back to the default. Exactly the way it's supposed to do. So you can imagine that after he picks something, if he was to get a match, he would return home and then laugh at you like that. So that's kind of what I'm trying to do now. So we got, the first one was pretty easy. It was only one frame of animation. Now the next one is going to be a couple of frames. We're actually going to have to sync it up to what he's saying. So let's see.
Piece of cake.
Okay, so it's 3 words. Piece of cake.
Piece of cake.
All right, so let's open up the JSON file that's linked with that one. Okay, so this is Brain Match 1. Like I said, it's already pre-populated because this is what I had to do. What you're seeing right now is all of this code is what it took. These is how many frames it took to say, let's play BattleBrain, because I just copied that JSON file. So we don't need to say all of those. We don't need to say let's play BattleBrain. So we can get rid of all of these frames and just start with one frame. Okay, so we have one frame here. So what I need to decide is, what do I want the first frame to be? So let's save that. And the way that I do that is it's going to take more than just looking at the duration here. I need to see what times each word is said. So the best way that I've found to do that is just open up a audio program. So if I open the wave, so this is the wave here, or wave, but sound here.
Piece of cake.
Piece of cake. I use, since I'm using the Mac, I use Adobe Edition, which is any wave program will do. Anything that lets you open up a sound and you can click within the sound and it tells you what the duration is and what is the time. So at the top here you get to see in I guess milliseconds how long everything is. So now I can play this in here. Let's play it from the beginning.
Piece of cake.
Piece of cake. Okay. So what I noticed here is there's silence at the beginning, and you don't start. If I scrub it here, you see that the talking doesn't start until here. And if I look at the time, that starts about, let's say, 0.15. So there's about 0.15 seconds of silence. So that's what the first frame is just going to be silence up to that time point. So what I want to happen is, for that first frame, he should have his mouth closed. So let's see. If we go back to Unity, since he's not talking, we'll go and look for which frame where his mouth is closed, which is this one. So the first frame of the animation should be a closed mouth, which is index 7. So let's put that in a JSON file and tell it that's what we want it to be. So I'm going to close this other one out because we're finished with Brain Match 0. We're on Brain Match 1 now, and we want to tell it the first frame of animation should be 7 with his mouth closed. And how long do we hold that for? We hold it for 0.15 of a second, and we got that, like I said, that 0.15 of a second from this time up here. So the next thing, what would be the next frame? So I want to match that up with the word. So let's find out the first word.
Piece of cake.
Piece of cake. So piece. It looks like this is piece of, and then this word is cake.
Cake.
Yeah, so that's cake.
Piece of cake.
So we need to find the first word, which is piece. Let's see.
Piece of cake.
So
Piece of cake.
yeah, that's pretty much the first word here is piece.
Piece of cake.
Which probably piece of, and I think this is, let's see. So this is kind of here. So this is piece. So the reason I wanted to find out what word this is because I want to drag and drop, drag and see how long it takes when he says the word piece. And if I look here, I see that piece, it lasts for about 0.17 seconds. Okay, so that's how long the next frame is going to be held for. So let's go and we're going to make a new frame. And in the JSON file, every time you make a new object, it's separated by a comma. So we're going to put a new frame here. So the first frame will be that. The second frame will last for 017. Let's just put it like that, of a second. Now we need to decide what frame, what animation do we want to represent the word piece. So what I did is I have a list in Photoshop of all of the mouths pieces that I imported, so I can just look at the mouths and see what they look like. Let's make that a little bit bigger, like that. Okay. So over here I put a little key for myself to help me know what sounds matches the talking the best. So if I'm going to do like a piece of cake, I'm going to use, I have a key here that this represents a mouth saying an E sound, like piece of cake. So if someone wants to talk, their mouth will probably be shaped this way. So I'm going to use this as the first frame for peas. So that would be number 3. Just let me go back to Unity and confirm that. So yeah, right here you can see that brain mouth 3. So that's going to be the first frame. So let's go back and update the JSON file and tell it, when you say piece, make that index 3. So let's make another frame. For the next frame, let's save that. So the next frame, we'll go back to audio. So that was about here. So that's piece. Now we need of, which should start about here. Of. So we know that this should be of, piece of cake will be the last word. So let's just handle of. So the first thing we'll look for is, what is the duration? How long should we hold this frame? And I look down here and it's about, let's say 0.25. We'll do that. It's a nice round number. So hold that, when you show it, hold it for 0.25. Now let's find out what index we need to show. And if I go here to Photoshop, so we're looking for something that would represent a mouth saying of, piece of. And what I have here is piece of. So this looks like it would be a good match because of the F sound and piece of. So normally when you do, you put teeth together, and so that represents this sound here. So that is index 6. So that will be the next frame. So you can kind of start to see how the data is shaping up. It would be really nice if I could add comments inside of a JSON file, something like this. So I could say, for instance, for this frame, I could say that would be piece. And then for this frame, I could put a comment and come and say of. And then for the next frame we're about to do, I can go ahead and add that in now. And then that frame would be cake. And then I could go in and, so that way when I look at it, I would know what word is associated with each one. But unfortunately, JSON files do not support comments. So I can do it for right now, just so that I can, so it's visual and you can see this would represent silence, something like that. So we'll leave the comments in for now, but they'll have to be removed before the JSON file can be parsed correctly. All right, so we have piece of. Now we need to work on, we're working on cake. So let's see. So if we go back to cake, oh, wait, did I put the, that's of. Okay, no, of is 2.5. Let's go back. Okay, yeah, that's right, 2.5. And that's the right animation. So let's find out how long cake is, because that's where we are right now. So let's go back. And it starts about here. It doesn't have to be exact, but once you get close, you just want to be close as possible. So that duration is about let's see, 47. So we're going to do 0.47. So piece of cake. So the word cake should last for 0.47, and the frame of animation that I want to associate with the word cake, let's find that. So there will be a long A sound, A, and my key here tells me that that's the mouth for A. So you know, if you were to do something like this, you could come and create your own different mouths. So this looks like if the A or A sound. So this is index number 2. So I know to come here and make this 2. So that's going to be silence piece of cake. So I think that's going to work. Let's test that out. We'll delete these comments so the JSON file will parse right. White space is okay. We can leave that line there. So we'll go back to Unity. It should reload in that JSON file. So remember, in code, I can play either one. If I push P, I'm going to play phrase 0, which is laugh, or if I push O, it's going to play piece of cake, because that's the order. So let's go back. It should be loaded up now. So I'm going to select the mouth. There we go. Okay, so right now, this brain image is, or prefab is not loaded yet.
Let's play BattleBrain.
Okay, so if I come here to play, go to BattleBrain. So the instance I load that brain up, what the script did is it went through and it took the information for this phrase 0 and phrase 1, and it added on 2 extra scripts here. One script to handle each one of the phrases. So I'm going to kick off the second script here and see if it syncs up. So I'm going to push O.
Piece of cake.
There we go.
Piece of cake.
So those are the animations. You see, if I push them, they it looks kind of like he's saying it.
Piece of cake. Piece of cake.
And everything lines up on time.
Piece of cake.
So that seems to work. If I push P.
Piece of cake.
Okay, so now I have a way in code where I can go and I can do this as many times as I want. Like I said, there are more phrases that I'm going to add later. For instance, I have another phrase.
That's how it's done.
That's how it's done. And more other phrases.
I'm on a roll. Brain power.
So these are all the things that he's going to say to you when he does something great and he gets a match. And in code, what I can do is, since I just call start phrase, I already found the actual spot when the brain actually returns home. So in my code, there's a case where the brain state is to go back home, and that's his home spot. When he returns home and he actually reaches his final destination at home and he's done, once his brain state is done, that's when I want to come and say, grab on that object, on the brain, because this is a handle to the actual brain model. I go and I grab a script on that model, and then inside that script, that's where I can access the start phrase method here, which is just a wrapper for start phrase for the lip sync manager. Because the lip sync manager that I showed you at the beginning, that is the class that controls this. So that's all that is that just wraps up that. So if I was to play this now, when the brain goes home, he should automatically say phrase 0, which is the laughing phrase. So we'll play that. And what will happen is he'll automatically say it. Now in the future, I'm going to add some if statement or logic to go through and randomize this. So right now I just have it hard coded to play phrase 0. But yeah, imagine I'm going to replace the 0 with like a random number. It's just going to generate a random number from 0 to however many phrases I have, and he's going to randomly pick and say a phrase. Alright, let's go back. But right now, this time, he should, when he returns home, he should automatically say it without me having to push any buttons.
Let's play BattleBrain.
Alright. I guess screen recording is making it a little bit choppy. Okay. So I'm going to pick 2 cards to force him to take his turn. Okay. Then he'll go. And when he returns home, he should speak. Perfect. And that's how that's done. Now, just to go over just a quick walkthrough of kind of how the scripts work. In order to do that, I have the lip sync manager script here. What it does is, at the beginning, I just told it to be serializable. I created an inner class that's serializable, and all that means is if you make a class serializable, that it's accessible in the Unity editor, and that all of the variables in that class can be seen through the Unity editor. That's why you can see the audio clip that's needed for each phrase. So this class for each phrase needs an audio clip, needs a JSON file, and then it also needs a lip sync object, which is another class that I created. The DivideArt's lip sync object, this is the class that actually handles all of the animation and plays the waves and everything. This main class manager goes in and just it takes all the data, the audio clip and the JSON files, and it creates a lot of these lip sync objects. So let's just walk through what a lip sync object is before we get into the manager. So this lip sync object, this is what controls playing the animation and making sure that it lines up with the duration. So if you see that this represents 1 frame of animation, this class is a lip sync frame, and you've seen that before. There's a duration and a texture index, and this is what gets loaded in from the JSON file and gets populated. So if I was going to create 1 phrase, it would need a array of these. And just to quickly give you an overview, so that's why I created an array of frames, and then you would need a reference to the audio clip, and then you'll create an audio source from that. There's a few variables here that I need to that control letting me know if you're animating, so I can check to see if a certain frame or certain phrase is actually being if it's animated or not. I have a value that controls the timer, so that as it holds the duration, and I can use that as a timer to count down. And I need to know the current frame of the animation. I need an array of textures, which this is just a reference to these images here, all 10 of these images. So once you pass that to the class, it will know. Let's go back there. So it will be able to access those images. Like I said, I'm going to need a way of storing what is the default texture index, and to be able to check if this is active or not, if this script is active or not. And so I have an initialize function. I could have made a constructor, but for the sake of the manager creates a lot of these objects. So the manager needs to have an initialize function instead of just a constructor, and that'll make more sense when I walk through the manager. So for right now, all the initialize function does is that it needs you to pass in the audio data, pass in a list of frames, all of the different frame datas, a list of textures that we're going to be dealing with and what you want the default texture to be. And then this class will handle animating those. It will go in, store all those variables. It will set up the audio. So for every audio clip that you have to create a audio source component to play it, and this is how I do that. And then it has a public method called play, and in play I do a lot of checks to make sure that all of the everything is there, nothing is null. And if everything is okay, I check the audio. If the audio is already playing, stop it and then play it again from the beginning. Say, yes, I'm animating now. I'm animating this phrase. Start the current frame to the first frame of the index, which is 0. And then I go in, and this script will be attached to the mouth. So what it will do is it will get the component on the mouth. It will get the renderer on the mouth object. It will search its material, and then it will change or assign something to its texture. So that's how you can change a texture on an object. And all I do is I already have an array of textures here, and what I do is I pull the information from the JSON file and I put that in there. So whatever the current frame is from the JSON file, I go and I grab that index or that texture index, and that's going to be whatever that's going to be assigned. So that's kind of how that works. And then the same thing is that I set the timer or the countdown to the duration that came from the JSON file for that same current frame. So that's how the duration gets set. And then I say, yes, it's active and true. Stop pretty much just goes in. If you want to stop animation in the middle of talking or stop a phrase in the middle of talking, I do the same thing. I just do a check to make sure everything's valid and not null, and I just basically reset all of those variables back to their defaults, and I just stop the audio. And then if you're going to stop an animation, then you need to set the texture back to the default texture. So whatever I have the texture array, and then whatever I want the default texture. So this is like setting the mouth back closed. So if I stop it, he will close his mouth. Public variable that's useful to check if this is active or not. And on update, so each frame that I go through, and this is where the magic happens, I check to see if you're animating. If that only in the case where this is true, because we don't want to do unnecessary processing. So only if this animation is set to true, which this is set to true when you call play, and only if the timer is greater than 0. So the timer represents the duration of how long to hold a frame. So what it does is once a frame is shown, a timer is going to be set for how long to show that frame. So I use delta time to remove the time each frame, and until delta time or until the next frame reaches 0. And then that's how I know that you have it's time to switch to the next frame. So once I've shown that frame for the right amount of time, then I increment the next frame. I'm going to go to the next frame, and first I do a check to see, okay, are we at the end? Did we reach the end of this animation, the end of this frame? If we did reach the end, just call stop. Else, if we didn't reach the end, there must be another frame of animation that we can move to. So this is pretty much the same code as before. We just set the main texture to the next frame of animation. Since we incremented current frame here, then that's going to set it to the next frame. And then it's also, we need to set the next duration or the next time. And that will just run until all the frames are played, and then it will stop. So this controls going through and actually doing the animation. What the manager does is it creates a lot of those lip sync objects, and that's where I want to show you for each phrase it creates one of those. So that's how I link the audio clip, the JSON file, and I link it to the actual animation itself. And all of that is inside of the phrase class. Now there's another class that's serializable, but it's not really used outside of this class. But this is how I read in a JSON file. Pretty much this is a static wrapper class. I just call it create from JSON, and I pass the string of the JSON file. It uses JSON utility. You could probably Google that and get a lot more information on it, but pretty much this is all you need in order to load a JSON file in. Once you have the path to the JSON file, this will create it for you and return you a parsed JSON file. And this is the main start or constructor, but basically the main class, which is the manager itself. And yeah, I know that divide arts lip sync, it's missing an N here, but it's abbreviated. So yeah, and so this is where I went in and I made these public so that they can be visible in the editor, and that's where you get to set the number of textures, texture path, and the default texture, and an array of phrases, and that is linked to this script that I put on the mouth. So that's where this number of texture and all of these come from, and all of the phrases. So let's go back here, and have a couple of private variables. The shared texture. So the shared texture is an array of all of the textures that you tell it to load. So for instance, I told it there's going to be 10 textures, and this would be the path to those textures. Once those textures are loaded, they are stored in this texture array, and I called it shared texture because this is shared between all of the lip sync objects here. So that I don't have to load for each phrase, doesn't have to go in and load an array of textures. It's really optimized that way. And I just keep a variable to the current playing phrase. The manager lets you know which phrase is currently being said or being played. By default, it's -1 because -1 is no index. But if there's the current phrase that was, for instance, if I want to play phrase 0 here, element 0, then that variable would tell me that the current phrase playing would be 0. So the manager just handles which phrases are being played, and it handles creating each phrase that you say. And the start is pretty much the beginning here, and that's when I load everything in at the start when the script is first run. That's where I allocate the memory for the all of the textures. I loop through the number of textures that you said, how many they are, and I do a load, and I load each texture into the array. And this load function is just a wrapper function. It wraps up so here it just wraps up resources.load, so that I don't have to type of texture every time and cast it to a texture type. I just wrap that up and call load texture and give it the path and made it static. So now it's a really easy way of just loading the texture instead of having to type all that again. And I make sure the texture is not null. If it is, I need to give an error, because there could be a time where maybe there's a typo, or I left a texture out or something, and texture may not be there. So it's nice to know that. Next, I check to make sure that none of the phrases are null. And when I say phrases, that's also that's linked to this phrase object here, and you have to at least have one. So we have 2 phrases. If you don't have any phrases, then there's no need to go and process any of this. That's why we check to make sure that's not null. We loop through however many phrases you said, the length of those phrases, and for each one I check to make sure that you did put a JSON file. If there's no JSON file, or if there's no audio clip, I just return out and give a log message, because in some cases it might happen where you may forget to, for instance, populate this one, and you'll get a message letting you know that you need to put a file there. So if everything passes, then we come in here and we create from JSON file, since I have the JSON file itself, and text is the actual name of the file. So JSON file here, if I go back to Unity, when I copied this file here into JSON file, into this variable, in order to get the name of that file, brain match 0, I need to access .text. So if you have that will give you the name of the file. So this needs the full path of the file. That's why I gave it the name. So this will load in a JSON object, which is pretty much going to be an array of lip sync objects. We go in, and because all of this is happening on that mouth, we go in, we need to add a component. Each time we create a phrase, we need to add this class onto it to handle each phrase. So that's all this is doing. It's adding a component for each phrase that we want, and we're assigning it here. So now that we have an object of a lip sync object, now we can go and initialize it. That's why I didn't want to make this a constructor, because I wanted to first do the add the component and then go and initialize it. So at this point, I just created a phrase, or a lip sync phrase, and then I go and I just feed it all of the data that the manager has collected. So the manager knows the audio clip, it knows the list of frames, and this list of frames is directly tied to this JSON file. So that's this list here. The shared texture, so all the textures, and then the default index, and that populates that, and now this phrase is ready to be played. And then the manager lets you start a phrase. That's what we called at the beginning. You just tell it what index, what phrase you want. I check to make sure that you pass through a valid number, and that phrase is not null. And if all of that passes, we check to see if it's already running. So if, for instance, you're trying to play a phrase that is already being played, I call stop on it first. And then I go in, and whatever phrase, the index you're trying to play, if it's not null, then I say, okay, now you're playing this current phrase. That's the current phrase that's being played. And then call its play method. The same thing for stop, pretty much the same thing. If you want to stop phrase 0, you tell it the same thing. It does the same checks, and all it does is it just calls its stop method, and it puts current phrase index back to -1. Then that's how we can tell that nothing is running. If we check this variable and it's -1, then the manager says, okay, there's no talking going on, there's no phrases. And the update method is pretty simple. All it does is it says, so we know that if the current phrase that's playing, if it's 0 or greater, then something must be playing, and only if something is playing do we go and we check if it's active. So we can check if it's active, and what that means is if you're in the middle of talking or saying a phrase, and the phrase stops, is active will return false. So that's what it does. Is as long as there's a phrase that's active, do nothing. But once it's not active anymore, then you come in and you reset the current phrase back to -1. And then the rest of the code uses that. And like I said before, I showed you what these if statements do. They pretty much just help me test those phrases out. So that is a overall walkthrough of what needs to be done in order to get the mouth to lip sync, and in order to get the brain to talk. So in my next video, I'm going to walk through a little bit of gameplay, the actual gameplay itself, and I'm going to go and add in more of these, all the rest of these. I'm going to make JSON files for all the rest of these, add some randomness into the game so that he'll say random things. And then you'll be able to see how all of this fits together in the next video. So I hope you liked the video. See you next time.